I want to start by saying that I'm not someone who believes in ghosts. I never was. I grew up in a practical family, in a practical house, with a father who told me that fear of the dark was just fear of the unknown, and that the unknown had a rational explanation every single time. I believed that. I lived by that. I don't anymore. We moved to Harlan County, Tennessee, in the spring of 2021. My wife had taken a job there, good money, something we couldn't turn down. The house was older than we were used to. Late 1800s construction, they told us, but renovated twice over. Solid bones. Sat on about 2 acres of land, mostly flat, surrounded by old tree lines on 3 sides. The kind of place that photographs beautifully. The kind of place you feel lucky to find. It was priced way under market. The realtor said the seller was motivated, and we were happy to get it at such a good price. Our son Caleb was 5 at the time. He loved it immediately. He said it felt like a storybook house. That's the word he used. Storybook. The first time he mentioned the man, it was maybe 3 weeks after we moved in. We were having dinner, nothing unusual, and Caleb just looked up from his plate and said there was a man standing in the yard last night. Calm as anything. The way kids say things like they're reporting the weather. I asked him what he meant. He said he'd woken up around midnight and walked by the window on the way to get a glass of water, and there was a man standing out in the yard, just standing there. He said the man had a funny hat on and funny clothes, and he wasn't moving. I went outside after dinner and walked the whole property. Nothing. I checked the tree lines, the edges of the fence, the area near the old detached garage we never really used. Not a single thing out of place. I told my wife it was probably a dream. She agreed. 5-year-olds have vivid imaginations. We moved on. But I walked out there again that night after everyone went to bed, just to check. I stood on the back porch for maybe 10 minutes, scanning the yard in the dark. Quiet. Just the crickets and a little wind. Nothing. I went back inside. 2 nights later, I woke up around 2 a.m. for no reason I could name. That particular kind of waking where something pulls you out of sleep and you don't know what it was. I lay there for a minute and then I got up. I don't know why. I just got up and went to the hallway window. The one that faces the backyard, and I looked out. At the far edge of the yard, right where the grass meets the tree line, there was a shape. I want to be careful about how I describe this. I didn't immediately think it was a person. It was dark. It was far away. It could have been a fence post I hadn't noticed, or a shadow thrown by the tree branches. My brain was doing what brains do, and it was looking for the easy explanation. But I stood there, and I watched it, and it didn't move. And there was something about the shape of it, something vertical, something that had shoulders. I went back to bed. I told myself it was nothing. A week after that, Caleb came and found me while I was working in the garage on a Saturday afternoon. He walked in, stood next to my workbench, and waited until I looked up at him. And then he said very quietly that the man was back last night. I asked him to tell me more. He said the man was wearing a gray jacket. He said the jacket had buttons down the front, and that the man was just standing there at the edge of the yard, looking at the house. He said he watched him for a long time and the man never moved, not once, not even a little bit. I crouched down to his level and I asked him as gently as I could whether the man had done anything, whether he'd come closer, whether he'd looked up at Caleb's window. Caleb thought about it for a second and said, "No, he was just looking at the house." I didn't sleep well that weekend. The following Tuesday night, I was up late, sitting at my desk, finishing some work, and for some reason I got up and went to the back window. No particular reason. Or maybe there was a reason I couldn't articulate, some low-frequency thing at the edge of my awareness, some pressure I didn't have a name for. I looked out. He was there. Not at the tree line this time. Closer. Maybe 60, 70 feet from the house. Standing in the middle of the yard, in the open, not hidden by anything. And even in the dark, even with just the faint light coming from the neighbor's property a quarter-mile out, I could make out the shape of him. Old-fashioned clothing, the gray button-down coat, something on his head, the stillness of him, that specific, absolute stillness that isn't like a person waiting. It's like a person who has forgotten they're supposed to move. I stood at that window for 2 full minutes. Without blinking, he didn't move. I went and got my flashlight, came back, and when I pointed it at the yard, he was gone. Nothing. Just the flat, dark grass and the trees beyond. I checked all the doors. Locked. I sat in the kitchen until sunrise. I didn't tell my wife what I'd seen. I'm not sure why. Maybe I was still protecting myself from the conclusion. If I said it out loud, it became real. It became real 10 days later. Caleb woke us both up at 3 a.m. Not screaming, not panicked exactly, but there was something in his voice that got me out of bed fast. He was standing at the door of our bedroom and he said very simply, "There are more now." I followed him to his room. I looked out his window. Across the yard there were 4 of them, maybe 5. Spaced apart, not clustered, each one standing separately in the grass. The same stillness, the same posture, facing the house. My wife was beside me. She made a sound I'd never heard from her before. Not a scream. Something quieter than that. Something that came from somewhere deeper. I told her to take Caleb to our room and lock the door. I grabbed my flashlight and my phone and I went downstairs. Here is where I need to tell you something. I unlocked the back door and I stepped onto the porch and I swept the flashlight across the yard. They were gone. Not one of them. The yard was empty. But the thing that stayed with me, the thing that keeps me up at night, is that when I turned to go back inside and look through the glass panel in the back door, there was a shape reflected in it. Just for a second. A figure standing close behind me. I spun around. Nothing there. I don't know what I saw. I can't explain it. But I went back inside and I did not go near a window for the rest of the night. The next 3 weeks were bad. They were worse than I've told anyone. They started appearing at different windows. Not every night, but enough. My wife started seeing them too. She'd catch them at the side window near the kitchen or at the window by the front door. Always the same. Always still. Always facing in. She found one at the bedroom window one night, ground floor, close to the glass. She said it was close enough that she could see the buttons on the coat. She woke me up, and by the time I got there, it was gone. But she described it in detail. The gray uniform, the gray-brimmed hat, the complete stillness. She said the thing that got her was the way it stood. She said it looked like it was waiting. Like it had been waiting for a very long time. We started leaving every light in the house on at night. It didn't seem to make a difference. One night, this was about 5 weeks after Caleb first mentioned the man, I woke up at 2 a.m. and looked out the hallway window out of habit, and I stopped. I counted 9 of them. Spread across the yard in rough formation, not random, but not perfectly lined up either. Natural spacing, like men at rest. All of them facing the house, all of them completely still. And then while I was watching, I looked away for a moment, just to rub my eyes, just for a second. And when I looked back, one of them was closer. Not by much, maybe 10 feet closer. But I'd been watching and I had not seen it move. I didn't tell Caleb what I'd counted. I didn't need to. He told me the next morning over breakfast, in that calm, flat voice of his. He said there were a lot of them last night, Dad. I asked him how many. He said, too many to count. I didn't leave the house to look into it. I didn't want to be away from my family that long. So I sat at the kitchen table one night with my laptop and started digging. The county had an online archive. Old records, scanned documents, bits of local history nobody had bothered to organize. I found a reference to the land our house sits on. Not the house itself, the structure came later, but the land. It mentioned a group of soldiers positioned around a farmhouse that used to stand on the property. The wording was strange. It didn't describe an attack. It said they held position through the night, that they surrounded the structure and did not advance. There was no record of them ever going inside. The entry just stopped. No explanation, no outcome, no follow-up. I closed the laptop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't learned anything new. Just recognize something I'd already seen. We started looking for another house immediately. My wife had already called her sister. We were making plans. But there's something I haven't told you yet. Something that happened the last night we were there. It was late, just after 2 a.m. I got up one more time, because by then it had become something I couldn't stop myself from doing. Some compulsion I didn't fully understand. I went to the hallway window, and I stood there and I looked out, and for a long time I just processed what I was seeing. They were everywhere, dozens of them, spread from one side of the property to the other, standing in the grass, in the gravel at the edge of the driveway, along the fence line, at the border of the tree line, across the field that butted up against the south side of the lot. In every direction I could see, still, silent, patient, and something about standing there, looking at all of them, something shifted in me because I was looking at them and they weren't looking at me. Not one of them had their face tilted up toward my window. Not one of them was angled toward any of the windows. We'd all assumed that they were watching us. We'd felt it as a kind of surveillance, a being seen, the particular horror of being observed by something that doesn't blink, but standing there in the dark, watching all of them, dozens of gray figures spread across 2 acres of Tennessee grass. I realized something. They were looking at the house, not at us, at the structure itself, the walls, the roof, the foundation, the building, like they had come to see it, like they had been coming to see it for a very long time, like they were waiting for something inside it to come out. I don't know what that means. I've thought about it every night since we left. I've thought about what it is about that house, that specific house on that specific piece of land that would draw him. I've thought about what it was before it was a house, what happened there, what was left behind. I don't know. But I know this. The house is still there. Someone else lives in it now. And I think about them, the new family, the new kids with their faces at the windows. I wonder if they've started waking up at 2 a.m. yet. I wonder if they know what's out there, and I wonder if they've figured out, the way I did, that the things standing in that yard, they aren't watching them at all. They're waiting for something in that house to come out on its own, waiting to ambush, waiting to strike,